Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Critical Reactions with your host, Bryan. We're going to wrap up today with our final special selection, this one coming at us from Jason. Really liked your other Sonic Youth reactions. This song is from Daydream Nation, but performed later in their career when I think they were at their peak live. So we're going to be looking at the track The Sprawl. Looks like it was performed. I don't know when it was performed. Recorded August 2007. Okay, there we go. Alright, let's dive into this and see what Sonic Youth is bringing to the table today. Is he blowing the wood? No, he must have been getting just the one string. I just realized they have two bassists. That's pretty awesome. I like the engineering on this. Makes it really easy to hear which instruments are playing. Like a little reset there. It's really interesting listening to the song flip between that energetic brightness and this driving darkness. Back to the dyad exploration. Oh, very neat. We got mallets instead of drumsticks. So I take it the last bit of this song is going to be a bit on the softer side. What a soundscape this is, though. I find this fascinating because there's a lot of elements here that I am just not a fan of. And so I want to primarily speak positively about this track, but I also want to make it really clear that I enjoyed the ending. And that's not an ending well, not even just, well, okay, let me rephrase this. I enjoyed the ending. The ending was an adaptation of ideas we had heard previously that I wasn't really a fan of then, and I'm usually not a fan of. So I find it really interesting that the ending worked for me given what it was. I want to talk about this song though in two portions. One is the traditional element, our verse and our chorus. The other is going to be the post rock atmospheric driven sections that we saw in the intro between our first chorus and second verse, and everything that came after our second chorus into the outro. That is a completely different beast of this track and explores a wildly different idea. So, with our verse and chorus, we primarily move between the brighter sounds. It's very energetic. It's not positive, but it's bright. I hope that makes sense. Very guitar led, higher arranged pitches being played by the two guitars. It drives this entire section. The vocals are a bit more energetic than we'll hear later. Interestingly, the vocals are mixed rather low in this, but I'm not going to attribute that to the song so much as this performance. I don't know what was going on, but I'd wager that on the studio version or possibly other live versions, the vocals have a little bit more meat to them. But the two basses don't do a lot of stuff here. It's very driven by the two guitar lines, and we get to hear the build up as the right guitar starts out with the idea, the left guitar comes in and plays the harmony on top of it, and then the two basses come in and play some very foundational stuff underneath it. From then, the vocals come in, and the whole thing is set. The drums come in with the second guitar, I think. Maybe with the basses, I don't remember. It has energy, it has drive, it's bright, it feels positive with a little bit of bite to it. I'm not sure what that bite is. I don't know if it's anger or sadness. I don't know if I should be reading this as bittersweet or anything like that. But it stands in stark opposition to where we go after this, where the guitars change up to some lower ranges. The vocals kind of come down a little bit in range and in pressure. They kind of get a bit softer here, and it's more of a comfortable speaking range almost than a singing range. The drums come down, release some of the cymbal intensity, and kind of work with just the toms and snare and bass kick with hi-hat pedal work going on here. Quarter note hi-hat, yep. And this entire section is dark and brooding, and it stands in such stark opposition to what we just heard. But it still is simple. We have a single little riff that we have in the guitars. We have foundational pedal tone stuff, I think, in our basses. And the drums are a bit lighter here, again, working primarily with the earthier tones of the tom and snare. From here, though, we tend to peter out and do something totally different. Now, I do think that this darker chorus, is a good transition into the moodier atmospheric stuff that we end up hearing after both of the choruses. But I think even just in isolation, if they had ditched the atmospheric stuff and made a song that was just the verse, chorus, some sort of traditional bridge, return back to the moody chorus and wrap it up in like 4 minutes, I think it still would have been a good song. I think it still would have been remembered fondly. But it really is this other section here that, at least to me, elevates the work. I haven't heard a lot of Sonic Youth, but post rock is not something that I think I would associate with them, but is 100% what we get here. And they do it phenomenally well. We have a complete dissociation of the song. Before, where our two guitars were playing the same thing but harmonized, and our two bassists were usually playing the same thing but small variation. For instance, they played the same note, but the the bassist who wasn't the vocalist did half as many hits, so playing in halftime basically. Instead of 16th notes, played eighth notes. They were pretty much on the same page though. These atmospheric sections, everyone is on their own page. Nobody is doing anything similar. There's so many moving ideas that create conflict everywhere. It wasn't so strong at the beginning, but especially the after the first and second choruses and our outro, the tension is palpable. There is a darkness within the music that was sort of alluded to with the chorus, but quite present now. Many of the lines no longer work well with each other. Nobody is doing the same rhythm, nobody is doing the same pulse, nobody is doing the same riffs but harmonized. Everybody's sort of doing their own thing, and it creates rhythmic tension, it creates harmonic tension. There is so much dissonance in these moments. And you never really know where the song is going. There's no direction either. It's just a chaotic flurry, and it ends whenever they want it to end. And honestly, it feels sort of organic, like they're not choosing when to move on, the song is. And of course, that's not true, but that's what it feels like. And that's what makes this song really interesting. It feels like its own thing. And of course, at the end of the atmospheric section that comes after our first chorus, eventually it does dwindle down until we have just the right guitar, and they bring in that riff again for the verse. And they start out a little slow, and then they build into it, and then they add in the harmonic notes at the end of the riff, and then the other guitarist comes in, and we come back for verse number two. It's a really nice transition. All of it is. Like I mentioned, the brightness to the darkness to the chaos, and then kind of reducing the power of the chaos to nothing and sort of hitting a reset on the entire song and returning back to that single guitar line we had at the beginning of the verse. It really is starting high, coming down, feeling this growing power, and then the power petering out before we start high again. It is. Oh, you know what? Falling idea doesn't work well. A cycle does. Yeah. Bright, dark, chaotic, lower energy, turn to the bright. A singular brightness before the band comes back in. It's about, uh, almost in a sense, the singular guitar would be like the minimal amount of brightness. We introduce the energy, we slowly turn into darkness, we take that darkness to find its peak, and then we peter out back to the lowest point of brightness. So it is this yin and yang kind of thing, a gradual rising and falling of power between a brightness and a darkness. Very cool. One thing I want to point out before we hit the lyrics is experimentation. There's a lot of stuff in here that deals with sonic experimentation, the way that things sound. We have the use of a bow on an electric guitar, both across all the strings and some of the strings, and only one of the strings. And I swear it looked like he was bowing some of the wood, which I assume might still get picked up by the pickups. I don't know. There's also tapping the bow on the neck. There were a couple of places where you could see the guitarist. Actually, I know it was the left guitarist and the lead vocalist on her bass those two I remember specifically, would sort of knock on the back of the neck of the guitar, which would induce vibrations and vibrate all the strings. I'd get picked up, and there's lots of little things in here that are uncharacteristic usage of these instruments that end up creating sounds that are rather unique, and less unique generally, but more unique in this area of music and rock is the use of mallets on the drums. It introduces a really nice softness to all the attacks that comes out of the drum kit in our final section, our final minute or so. So I appreciated that. It's very rare to see a drummer in rock use anything other than drumsticks. So I appreciate that. Was there anything else I picked up on? I'm sure there were some other things. But yeah, so just taking that idea, the genre that I typically associate sonic experimentation with outside of avant-garde is prog, classic prog. And so I started to think about this track from that perspective as well. It's kind of punky in some ways, but it's also post-rocky, and there's an experimentation with the sound of the instruments, and I don't know what genre to put this in, but prog punk or pronk is sort of where I want to place it. But it's also really cool how I can hear some what would probably be influences on later bands as well. This isn't the first time I've listened to a Sonic Youth track and thought of something that Jack Off Jill has done. And so this vocalist just really, the vocalist and the music just have to be a really strong influence on that band. But like I said, there's also a post rock thing. I don't know when post rock started. Mid 90s seems to be about the time that all of this current subgenre started to begin exploding in popularity and experimentation. So maybe they were at the forefront of this. I don't know. But there is a strong atmospheric element here. I do want to bring up one thing though on the topic of theme. And I was talking about the cycle, right? But the song ends on the moodiness. And it's almost like the cycle has been broken and we're stuck in the darker side of things. But it's not as, if I remember right, the final bars were not the moodiest, most chaotic section. They were a bit calmer. They still had that sorrow to them, but it wasn't the the dark noise. And so I don't know how to read into that. I don't know what specifically they're aiming for, but it does feel like the cycle was broken and they ended up sort of in the middle of both. A little bittersweet. We'll see what the lyrics have to deal with that, and then we'll wrap this up. Alright, I have no idea what's going on here. The chorus is just come on down to the store, you can buy some more and more and more and more, which is apparently a tagline from a series of TV ads for Bloomingdale's, the department store in the 1980s. That is, I'm going to wager, done sarcastically, a bit tongue in cheek, given that I know who Sonic Youth are. I don't think they'd be promoting rampant, unchecked, uncritical consumerism. The second verse just seems to be speaking about small town life and wanting to get out. Growing up in a small house, seeing big machines outside made of steel but probably rusted now. The idea of living in an industrialized area but low income possibly. It says there's a big sign down the road and that's where it all started. We could tie this back into consumerism and it might have been a billboard of some sort. But verse 1 seems to be very different from everything else. Um, it's she basically says, "Yeah, I may dress feminine, but that's not necessarily who I am." And somebody else turned me on by the way that they spoke to me and the way they looked. Which I guess kind of comes into the idea of commodity again in consumerism, specifically with the line, he was candy all over, relating it to something you would purchase and consume. But, like, what do all of these disparate ideas mean together? There is a small, almost falling apart of a fraying thread tying them together on the line of consumerism. But past that, I don't really know. If anyone else has any insight into this, let me know because it just feels like a series of ideas that vaguely kind of connected. Those are my thoughts on Sonic Youth's The Sprawl. Let me know yours down in the comments section. Give me your perspectives, opinions, if you enjoyed it or not, or anything else. Let me know what's up. Above that, in the description box, you'll find a link to Linktree that takes you to this menu. You can find links to my music, ways to support the channel, a link to the Discord server, and so much more. Above that, if you could, like, subscribe, and ring the bell. I greatly appreciate all three of those. That wraps it up for today. We'll be back tomorrow checking out some brand new music. That'll be at 5 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, 9 p.m. UTC, as usual. Until next time, remember to be critical, not cynical, of the music you listen to, and have a fantastic morning, afternoon, or evening whenever you choose to watch my videos.